Welcome everyone to this lecture on views. Often there are specific combinations of tables and conditions that you find yourself using over and over again for a project. So, instead of having to perform that same query again and again as a starting point and making sure all your statements are correct and having to rewrite that syntax manually, what you can do is you can create a view. That will allow you to quickly see the query with just a simple call as if it were a table that already existed. For example, let's imagine that you have a database and you're working on a project that has something to do with this database. And as you're working on this project and writing reports, you notice that there's two tables that you're always joining together. So you're always having to write this query of selecting these columns from these tables joined with each other and so on. Now, instead of having to rewrite that same query over and over again, what you can do is you can transform that into a view. That way, you can instead just say select everything from the view and begin working from there. So what a view is, it's a database object that is essentially just a stored query. And a view can be accessed as a virtual table in PostgreSQL. And the reason I call it a virtual table is that the view is not actually storing that data physically in another part. Instead, it's simply storing the query in a way that allows you to easily execute that query as if you were just selecting from an already existing table. So it essentially transforms a complex query that if you're going to use it over and over again, just call it as if it was some table. So we'll select it from the view. Okay, so another important thing to note is that you can also update and alter existing views. Let's explore these views in pgadmin. Okay, here I am in pgadmin. I've created a new query editor and I've made sure to connect it to my DVD rental database since I'm going to be using tables from the DVD rental database. Let's imagine we're doing a project within our DVD rental store where we need to constantly be asking information about the customer names and their addresses. Well, in that case, I know if I select all the information from my customer table, I can see I have a first name and last name. And if I keep scrolling down, there's an address ID, which corresponds to their entry in the address table, which if I search for this, notice there's an address ID here and an address. So let's go ahead and join these together. So I'm going to say, select the first name, last name, and address from, and then we're going to select this from, let's go ahead and select it from the customer table, inner join, address on, and we'll say customer dot address ID is equal to, whoops, make sure we spell address correctly, and then we'll say address dot address ID. So if we go ahead and run this, notice now we have the first name, the last name, and address. So notice that this sort of query can start to get complicated very quickly. So it might be useful to save or store this query as a view instead of having to write this over and over again. And luckily for us, creating a view is super simple in PostgreSQL. The way we do this is once you have the query that you want to store ready, all you're going to do is use the keyword create view and then decide what you actually want to call this view. So we can call this something like customer info, and we'll save that as, and then the query below. So it's just create view, the name of your view, as, and then whatever you were interested in. So we go ahead and run this. You should see create view is successfully returned, which means now, instead of having to rewrite this entire query, I can simply say, select everything from, and the new view we created, customer info, run that, and returns back the same output. Keep in mind, you're not duplicating any information internally. Instead, you're really just saving the query, and it will be automatically called for you. That way, you can expand on this by adding things like where calls or having statements or group bys and so on. Really helps you simplify things for complex queries. Now, if you find yourself needing to alter a view and basically change the underlying query information from it, that's actually also pretty easy to do. You simply call the create or replace command. So the way we do that is let's go ahead and say create or replace view customer info as, and then I'm going to go into my query history, and let's scroll down here, and in your query history it's going to be a little different than mine, but you should be able to find the original query we created. So I copied it. Let's go ahead and put it in here. So recall, here's our original view query. Let's add in a new column. Let's go ahead and add in district here. So what that's going to do is say select first name, last name, address, and then I want to add in the district column to my customer info view. So I'm going to run this now. And now it said create view, query returned successfully. So let's say select everything from customer info again. We'll say select everything from customer info, run that again, and now notice the district is also included there. If you ever want to remove a PostgreSQL view, what you can do is just like dropping a table, you'll say drop view and then the view itself. Just like a table, you can also check if it exists first to prevent errors. So you can say drop view if exists, customer info. Okay, if you ever find yourself wanting to change the name of a view, you can say alter view, the name of your view, and then say rename to, and then the new name. So we can say something like, let's say C_info, run that has alter the view, which means customer info is no longer available for me. So if I try saying select everything from customer info, run that, it'll say it won't exist. But if I say select everything from C_info, run that, now it does exist. And if I ever want to drop this, then I can say just drop view, C_info, run that, and now the view no longer exists. Okay, so that's the very basics of creating views for your convenience in PostgreSQL. I'll see you at the next lecture.